The two gangs had marched more than half a month before they reached a mountain Hansen had never been to. On the way, Hansen had truly understood there was strength in numbers. No creatures could block their path with the rain of arrows from the archers and the charge of the cavalry. Of course, the scouts would inform them if there were herds of strong creatures ahead of them. Son of Heaven, where are the arrows you've agreed to offer? Asked young Manly. It was bullseye that Son of Heaven really needed this time, as normal arrows wouldn't harm a sacred blood creature at all, and Z-steel arrows were too expensive. Son of Heaven had agreed to provide bullseye with the arrows needed this time. Son of Heaven smiled and waved his hand. His henchmen then carried a box down from the back of a mount. They opened the box and it was filled with starlight arrows, each worth more than 1 million. It was made by Starry Group with 1% Z-steel. Manly, here are 100 starlight arrows we agreed on. Would you distribute them among your best archers? Son of Heaven smiled. Young Manly turned around and started calling out names. She had good arrows herself, so did Liu Hongtao. Hence, she planned to pick 5 other members of Bullseye out to use the starlight arrows. Soon she had 4 people picked out, and with some thought, she looked at Hansen and Yu. Hansen was slightly surprised, as he did not expect Young Manly to choose himself. But this was a good thing, and Hansen quickly stepped up and stood together with the other 4. While Young Manly was preparing to distribute the arrows among the 5, Son of Heaven suddenly said grimly, "Manly, are you sure about the archers? What is the problem?" Young Manly looked to Son of Heaven. "How is someone like him qualified to use the starlight arrows?" asked Son of Heaven coldly, pointing to Hansen. "I chose him, and that's why he's qualified," replied Young Manly. Son of Heaven looked at Hansen disgustedly and said to Young Manly, "I am not questioning your decision, but this person just will not do. Please replace him." Young Manly frowned, but she knew this campaign was dominated by Son of Heaven since he had provided everything. Bullseye was just here to help, so she couldn't refuse him. "Zhao Hua, come here." Young Manly had to let Hansen return to the team, and called out another name. Son of Heaven continued to stare at Hansen coldly. "Sen, you are really unlucky. You had the opportunity to get 20 starlight arrows and kill the sacred blood creature. Now it's all gone," said Suzayo Kiao with regret. Hansen shrugged. Although it was a shame he didn't get the 20 starlight arrows, he had an even stronger arrow in his quiver. He still had a chance. The archers each took position on the cliff and prepared their bows and arrows, waiting for the sacred blood creature to fly out from below. Hansen and Suzayo Kiao found a comfortable spot, and Son of Heaven suddenly walked over and said, "What are you useless scums doing here? Go away." Son of Heaven's henchmen shoved Hansen and Suzayo Kiao aside. Suzayo Kiao fiercely stared at them with anger. Hansen tugged on his arm and said, "It doesn't matter. Let's go over there." "They are pushing too far," said Suzayo Kiao bitterly. "Revenge is a dish best served cold. Just wait until you see Son of Heaven's face when we kill the sacred blood creature," smiled Hansen while walking to the other side with Suzayo Kiao. "It's not that easy. This cliff is wide and Son of Heaven's men are waiting on the other side. If the sacred blood creature went to their side, it would be too far from us. Even if it were only 300 feet from us, we couldn't even injure it without starlight arrows. Basically, we are just a decoy, a distraction." Suzayo Kiao smiled wryly. "You have money. Why didn't you buy a few starlight arrows?" Hansen looked at Zio Kiao puzzled. He remembered Suzayo Kiao to be very rich. 1 million should be nothing for him. "What do I need those for? It's outrageously expensive and you may not even be able to recover it. 1 million each, and you probably need to shoot 7 or 8 before you could hit something. No guarantee of killing anything either. I'd rather spend the money purchasing mutant creature meat." Then Suzayo Kiao lowered his voice and said, "Now Z-Steel is extremely overvalued. As the young master of Starry Group, Son of Heaven owns mines and factories of Z-Steel. So, he doesn't need to spend much on these arrows, as the cost of each arrow is at most 10,000. Such huge profits." Hansen was surprised. Well, now Z-Steel mines have been monopolized by a few groups. Also, the manufacturing technologies are not ready for producing alpha alloy with more than 5% Z-Steel. For some reason, the alpha alloy will become as brittle as glass if Z-Steel content exceeds 5%. Suzayo Kiao explained to the Hansen. While the two were chatting, they suddenly heard a howling like dragon under the cliff. Grabbing their bows, they looked down from the cliff. Such a gigantic lizard. Suzayo Kiao saw the creature under the cliff and let out a cry. Hansen also saw what the sacred blood creature looked like, a huge lizard covered in purple scales, flying out from the deep valley with a pair of feathered wings. The sacred blood creature was closer to where Hansen was, but still about 250 feet away. With the order of Young Manly, everyone started shooting down at the sacred blood creature that was trying to fly up from the valley. The arrows rained on it but couldn't even hurt the feathers on its wings, let alone the scales on its body. Even the starlight arrows could only leave some sparks before they fell. As the tips of the arrows were turned, its features remained intact. Hansen had already put his arrow with 1.2% Z steel on the bow, but did not shoot it out. This was the only arrow he had, and it would be useless if he didn't have the best angle. Its feathers and scales were too tough. Our arrows are useless unless we could shoot it in the eyes. Suzayo Kiao also shot a few arrows, which were completely wasted. As Suzayo Kiao was talking, Son of Heaven had summoned his eagle beast soul bow, and a beast soul arrow in the shape of a wolf tooth. Aiming at a wing of the sacred blood creature, Son of Heaven made his shot. Hansen saw that the beast soul arrow Son of Heaven used this time was much inferior to the sacred blood six-winged wasp arrow he used last time, so it must either be a mutant or primitive beast soul. The beast soul arrow flew across the sky like a black lightning bolt, cut through the purple feathers and nailed on the wing of the creature, making the creature utter a roar. Young Manly also summoned a white pigeon-like beast soul bow, along with a blue swordfish-like beast soul arrow. As she made the shot, the arrow also pierced the purple feathers and blood started to flow down the arrow. Neither Son of Heaven's arrow nor Manly's arrow was one use this time. After the arrows hit the target, they summoned them back to their hands. This means infinite arrows. Beast soul arrows are so much better than Z steel arrows in this sense. Hansen was green with envy, wishing he could grab the beast soul arrow from Son of Heaven's hands. It must be a mutant beast soul, or else it wouldn't have penetrated the wing of a sacred blood creature so easily. Son of Heaven and Young Manly both knew the wings were the weakest part of the creature and aimed again at its wings. The creature took another 2 shots and flew away from the cliff. Son of Heaven's beast soul bow was obviously stronger than Doomsday. When he made a shot 600 feet away from the creature, the arrow still went through its wing. Everyone was desperately shooting at the creature, while the injuries they made were still not fatal. The creature escaped and flew away. Go after it. Its wings were hurt so it can't go far. Son of Heaven gave the order, and those who had beast soul mounts all summoned their mounts and chased after the creature. Hansen and others who had no mounts could only follow by running and were soon left behind. After all, those with 2 legs could never outrun those with 4. In a while, they could no longer see the mounts and suddenly heard the thud of hooves. It was Qin Xuan and others who were attacking in the valley. Qin Xuan called to Hansen when her mount passed by him. Considering her mount could take a second person and Hansen was a good archer with Doomsday, Hansen was delighted and quickly leapt on the mount. He thought his chance had gone, but now Qin Xuan would take him, so he had a second chance. Qin Xuan followed the hoof prints and went ahead. Sitting behind her, Hansen had to put his arms around her to keep himself on the mount. She was in beast soul armor, so he couldn't really feel a thing. In addition to the hoof prints, there were also traces of blood on the ground, which must be from the sacred blood creature's wounds, proof that they were in the right direction. After 8 hours of chasing, Qin Xuan finally saw Son of Heaven, Young Manly and others ahead of them. Son of Heaven stopped in front of a mountain and looked up at the top of the mountain. Qin Xuan and Hansen approached. The mountain was like a sword plugged into the ground, standing at least half a mile high, and the sacred blood creature was crouching on the mountain top, howling from time to time. This mountain is too high. Even the beast soul arrows couldn't possibly hurt the creature. Seeing Qin Xuan, Young Manly said. Son of Heaven also looked to Qin Xuan and saw Hansen sitting behind Qin Xuan with arms around her waist. Suddenly he had an urge to kill Hansen. We must try to climb up to kill it as soon as possible, or we can chase it down. With the self-healing ability of a sacred blood creature, its wounds will heal in a few hours and we could no longer kill it by then, said Qin Xuan, staring at the mountain top. Then we will climb up and kill it. Son of Heaven put away his mount. This mountain is too steep. If we were attacked halfway, we would die, Young Manly objected. We could send a few people up and we will watch here. If it attacked, we would shoot it dead, Son of Heaven said calmly. Who should go up? Qin Xuan looked at Son of Heaven and frowned. Obviously, whoever going up will be in great danger and no one would not want to take the risk. Only Manly and I could threaten it with arrows. And we need you, Qin Xuan, to stay and give orders. The rest should all go up. We've come too far to give up. Whoever goes up can have a bigger share of its meat, so it is fair, right? Son of Heaven's gaze swept across the faces of the men in front of him and turned cold when it met Hansen. Son of Heaven's proposal was a risky one, but it was indeed their best chance to kill the sacred blood creature. The creature was now lying on the mountain top bleeding, its wings hardly moving. If they missed this opportunity, they might never be able to kill it. Finally, Qin Xuan agreed with Son of Heaven, but she decided to go up the mountain, leaving Son of Heaven and Young Manly, the only 2 mutant beast soul arrow owners, at the foot of the mountain. Xuan, no need to go up yourself. Just give orders from down here, Son of Heaven advised. There are no orders to be given. Since I have no mutant beast soul arrow, I might as well go up. Qin Xuan started climbing as she spoke. The crowd was divided into 7 groups, and each group was climbing toward the mountain top from a different direction. Hansen immediately followed Qin Xuan. He noticed Son of Heaven's cold stare at him and knew Son of Heaven was about to stab him in the back. Probably it would be Hansen himself instead of the sacred blood creature who got shot at first. Hence Hansen had made up his mind to follow Qin Xuan everywhere, so that Son of Heaven had no chance to play dirty. Indeed, Hansen was right. Son of Heaven had the idea of shooting Hansen dead from the moment he proposed everyone to climb up. On the slope, Hansen would have nowhere to hide and thus be doomed. But now Hansen was always following Qin Xuan. If Son of Heaven made any move, Qin Xuan would save Hansen for sure. However, Son of Heaven didn't give up just for this. Instead, he now had an even stronger desire to kill Hansen. All he needed was a moment when Qin Xuan went away from Hansen. Although the slope was steep, the groups were all equipped with a full set of climbing tools and they soon climbed halfway. The sacred blood creature was severely hurt. When it noticed the climbers, all it could do was howling at them as it was unable to go down and attack or fly away. As Qin Xuan and others approached the top of the mountain, the creature tried to fly away by flapping its blood-stained wings, while it immediately fell. All groups were overjoyed and started to shoot at it with arrows. Although they couldn't harm the creature, it was infuriated. Suddenly, the sacred blood creature flapped its injured wings and pounced on the closest man. The man had no place to hide on the slope and helplessly hacked his blade at the sacred blood creature. His blade cut the creature on the head but didn't even leave a trace on its scales. The man himself was bitten by the sacred blood creature and torn into 2 halves. His blood sprayed everywhere, which scared people off. At this point, everyone knew that the sacred blood creature was a spent bullet. It had bled too much and could hardly fly. Despite the casualties, they were going to kill this sacred blood creature. Not able to find a chance to kill Hansen, Son of Heaven had to take it out on the sacred blood creature. We cannot let it climb up. Qin Xuan summoned her beast soul and shapeshifted into a golden lion, climbing up using the holes left by the creature. Hansen was anxious. If Qin Xuan went away, he would become the target of Son of Heaven. Hansen reached out to grab the lion's tail and was suddenly dragged up. Qin Xuan gave him a fierce gaze, but he pretended not having seen it and still held on to her tail. Qin Xuan had no time to beat Hansen up and just chased after the creature at full speed. Seeing the sacred blood creature going out of his shooting range, Son of Heaven put away his bow and arrows and suddenly shapeshifted into a black ape more than 9 feet tall. Son of Heaven quickly ran to the slope and started climbing at a speed much faster than the other climbers. It was as if he were running on the ground. "Let go," cried Qin Xuan. She couldn't keep up with the sacred blood creature as Hansen was tugging at her tail. Hansen quickly let go of her tail. Son of Heaven was in a rush to kill the sacred blood creature, so he had no time to harm Hansen. Son of Heaven is a real asshole. He has such a strong mutant beast soul, yet he still sent us up and put us in danger. Hansen felt jealous as he saw the ape climbing up at an incredible speed. He did have the Bloody Slayer, but its strengths were its galloping speed on the ground and the dexterity of its human hands. For mountains as steep as this one, the Bloody Slayer could never climb up with its 4 hooves. Son of Heaven soon went ahead of Qin Xuan the Golden Lion and was directly behind the sacred blood creature. The creature that was already on the mountain top clawed at Son of Heaven as it saw him. Hansen found a place that was not so steep and held Doomsday in both hands while watching the fight on the mountain top. Pulling out a Skyfall arrow from his quiver, he shot it at the sacred blood creature. He barely hurt the sacred blood creature with his arrows and 2 were shot at Son of Heaven who was fighting the sacred blood creature. Of course, Skyfall arrows wouldn't hurt Son of Heaven either. It was so badly made that it wouldn't even pierce the skin of mutant creatures. Hansen was just warming up. After all, he only had 1 Z steel arrow and wanted to make sure he would succeed with it. "Damn it, do not shoot if you don't know how to use your bow. Put away your useless arrows," growled Son of Heaven who had been shot twice by Hansen. Qin Xuan rushed to the top and started to attack the sacred blood creature. Others also climbed back to the top and started shooting at the creature. Although the sacred blood creature was dying, it was still powerful. Howling on the mountain top, it forced everyone back. Neither Son of Heaven nor Qin Xuan could approach it. Suddenly, Son of Heaven shapeshifted back into his own body. He had only shapeshifted for an hour, although he could have shapeshifted longer than that with his Geno points. As Hansen was wondering what Son of Heaven was trying to do, he saw Son of Heaven summoning his red beast soul sword and slashing it at a bloody wing of the creature. King Xuan also shapeshifted back into herself, summoned her malicious butterfly dagger, and stabbed it at the creature. Several others on the mountaintop also used their own weapons to attack the sacred blood creature. The creature was injured heavily and Son of Heaven made a foot-long wound on its wing. The creature was bathed in its own blood. King Xuan took the chance to stab her dagger into the creature's wound and its blood suddenly turned black as it was poisoned by the dagger. "Attack harder. It is almost dead," yelled someone. And then everyone stepped up their game. Hansen saw clearly from where he was standing that the henchmen of Son of Heaven did have incredible skills. They moved around on the slope as though they were walking on flat ground. If they hadn't been there to distract the creature, Son of Heaven and King Xuan would not have succeeded so easily. Seeing that the sacred blood creature was almost gone, Hansen grabbed Doomsday and stared at the creature, looking for a chance to make the shot. If he made the last attack before the creature died, he would have an opportunity to gain its beast soul. Although the chance was very slim, an opportunity was still better than nothing. Son of Heaven took the risk and climbed up himself for the last attack as well. Whoever made the last hit could keep the beast's soul for him or herself. That was a default rule in the shelter. The reason was that only those who made the last attack would know if they had gained the beast's soul or not, and no one would know if they were lying. Crack! Son of Heaven's sword was slashed into the neck of the creature and made a cut so deep its bones were exposed. More blood started to gush out. The creature once again suffered a fatal hit and went mad. It gathered all its strength and swept its wings across the crowd, forcing everyone to back off. Trembling, it flew up again toward a different mountain. Everyone knew from how bad it was bleeding that it was going to die very soon. Son of Heaven quickly summoned his own mutant beast soul bow and arrow, shooting at the creature in the sky. The arrow penetrated its wing. The sacred blood creature couldn't take it anymore and started to fall with its wings helplessly flapping. It was falling too fast and it was too late for others to shoot at it. Son of Heaven was overjoyed as even if the sacred blood creature fell and died, he was still the one who attacked last and had a chance at its beast soul. Suddenly, an alloy arrow was shot from the slope and disappeared in the creature's wounded neck. Son of Heaven suddenly raged, and everyone else was shocked. In the blink of an eye, the sacred blood creature had fallen at the foot of the mountain and died. Sacred blood creature purple winged dragon killed. Sacred blood beast soul of purple winged dragon gained. Eat the flesh of purple winged dragon to gain 0 to 10 sacred blood Geno points randomly. The voice sounded in Hansen's mind. Hansen almost shed tears for happiness. However, he managed to fake disappointment, helplessness, and frustration. Everyone on the mountain top was looking at him, especially Son of Heaven. If he could kill with his sight, Hansen must have died a million deaths. Although there was the default rule, Hansen made up his mind not to admit he had gained the beast's soul, or Son of Heaven would definitely kill him. People who saw his disappointed look did not entirely buy it, but did feel better somehow. After everyone had come down from the mountain, Son of Heaven seized Hansen's collar and asked, "Have you got the beast's soul?" No, Hansen insisted that he had gained nothing. Son of Heaven was skeptical and tried to beat Hansen up, but King Xuan stopped him. "Son of Heaven, my guy broke no rules. He said he didn't get it. And even if he did, you have no right to ask him to hand it over to you," said King Xuan, her face grim. Hansen was in her gang. If he was beat up by Son of Heaven, she would have no authority in the future. Son of Heaven stared at Hansen for a long time before he walked toward the dead body of the purple-winged dragon, pulled out Hansen's arrow, and snapped it into 2 halves. After wrapping up the dead body of the purple-winged dragon, everyone returned to Steel Armor Sanctuary and King Xuan called Hansen into her office. "Did you get the beast's soul?" King Xuan stared at Hansen. "Station Master, I really did not get the beast's soul. Had I known this I would never have shot the arrow," said Hansen wryly. King Xuan didn't believe him. "Stop acting. If you have gained the beast's soul, I will not take advantage you either. If you want to sell it, I'm willing to pay. I can even pay you up front." "Station Master, I'd be a fool if I don't want to earn the money. I really did not get the beast's soul. If I could show you I would." Hansen looked depressed. King Xuan felt Hansen's emotions were authentic. She frowned and said to him, "Forget about it then. Do not go anywhere alone and stay in Bullseye these days. Son of Heaven might try to kill you." "I will behave." Hansen nodded. Back to Bullseye, Su Zioqiao put his arm around Hansen's neck and asked, "Sen, I heard that you made the last attack. Did you get the beast's soul?" "I wish, but unfortunately I don't even own a primitive beast soul, let alone a sacred blood one." Hansen shrugged and said, "Right, beast souls are very hard to come by. We can't all be as lucky as Dollar." Su Zioqiao sighed and said, He did not have too much doubt. After all, the probability of gaining a beast's soul was too low. Recently, you must be careful not to leave the shelter. Although you did not get the beast's soul, Son of Heaven wouldn't let you off the hook easily, said Suzayo Kiao. I know. Hansen patted Suzayo Kiao on the shoulder, thinking, he seems a nice guy. Back in his room, Hansen could not help but smiled and started to review his new beast soul. Type of sacred blood purple winged dragon's beast soul, flying. The introduction was brief, but reminded Hansen of so much he had heard about this type of beast soul. A flying beast soul meant the beast soul could turn into wings that could give its owner the ability to fly like a bird. Flying across the sky without the need for tools such as aircrafts was certainly a dream coming true. The most important part was that with the ability to fly, one's survival would become so much easier in God's sanctuary. A flying beast soul also allowed one to go where ordinary people couldn't reach. Flying beast souls were super expensive, even more so than the shapeshifting beast soul of the same level. Also, flying beast souls were so rare in God's sanctuary that you might not even be able to buy one even if you had the money. Amazing. A sacred blood flying beast soul. I wonder how many of these exist in the entire first God's sanctuary. Hansen was so excited that he almost jumped up. Primitive flying beast souls had a low speed and didn't allow the users to go very high. It could only bring people 10 feet above the ground. Mutant flying beast souls were better but still slow and clumsy. Sacred blood flying beast souls were much better than the others. But Hansen had never seen even mutant flying beast souls in Steel Armor Sanctuary. Of course, this had something to do with the fact that there were less flying creatures near Steel Armor Shelter. The room was too small for Hansen to summon the wings. When he calmed down from excitement, his eye fell on the copper-toothed beast that had turned completely purple and shiny as if it had been polished. Sacred blood. The copper-toothed beast has evolved into a sacred blood creature. Hansen was filled with unspeakable joy, staring at the beast. For 3 months, Hansen had been anxious about the result. But now he knew it for sure. Every 3 months, he could have a creature evolved into a sacred blood creature. If the words got out, everyone would go crazy. Like today, it was so hard for such a huge group of people to hunt a purple-winged dragon. And after it was killed, every member in the group would share its meat. Son of Heaven's gang would have a bigger share, and King Xuan's gang would have the rest. After everyone got their own part, how many Geno points can a small part of the entire body offer? Hunting that cost a lot of resources and effort like this one would happen at most once per month, and the success rate would be at most 50%. Yet Hansen could have the meat of an entire sacred blood creature all to himself every 3 months. Son of Heaven and King Xuan were both several years older than Hansen, but they still hadn't evolved to enter Second God's Sanctuary, which meant maxing out on sacred Geno points took a lot of time and effort. Behind Son of Heaven was Starry Group, and behind King Xuan was the military. Even they were not able to max out on sacred Geno points within 10 years. Sacred blood copper-toothed beast killed. No beast soul gained. Eat its meat to gain 1 to 10 sacred Geno points randomly. Although there was no beast soul gained, Hansen was still over the moon. He quickly set up a pot and was ready to make a stew. Meat of copper-toothed beast eaten. 1 sacred Geno point gained. 2 days later, Hansen finished a big pot of copper-toothed beast meat and even sucked the bones clean. He threw the bones into the fire so that there was nothing left. A total of 7 sacred Geno points was added to his former 18 points. Now Hansen had 25 sacred Geno points and his fitness had been further improved. He felt as though he had endless strength. Looking at the primitive shrieky beast he kept in the cage now, Hansen couldn't help but smacked his lips. Shrieky beasts were relatively small and had no hair, so he could just throw it in the pot entirely when it finished evolving. That was why Hansen had chosen a shrieky beast to evolve. Yesterday King Xuan had divided the meat of the purple-winged dragon among her gang. All she had was a smaller half of the body, so all each person would get was just a slice, about 1,000th of the body, which wouldn't be of much use at all. Hence, like most people, Hansen chose to get $200,000 as the reward instead of the slice of meat. When they were both at the agreed place, Hansen showed the blacksmith the broken arrow and asked him if he could repair it. The blacksmith said indifferently, "Nope. You could weld the parts together with any welding machine, but the toughness and stability wouldn't be the same. The arrow is wasted. Do you recycle the material? It has 1.2% Z steel, which is worth something, right?" asked Hansen. $5,000, the blacksmith said. "I bought the arrow for 300,000, and the Z steel is only worth 5,000. asked Hansen with his eyes wide. "Or you can keep it," the blacksmith simply said. "Fine, 5,000 it is." Hansen put away the money and asked, "Do you have better Z-steel arrows?" "No, I have a dagger with 5% Z-steel though." "You want it?" replied the blacksmith. "How much?" Hansen knew that 5% Z-steel was the limit of the contemporary technology. Alpha alloy would become as brittle as glass if the percentage of Z-steel was higher than that. 300,000, said the blacksmith. Through the warehouse, the blacksmith showed Hansen into a room. This room looked like an armory and Hansen was dazzled. A variety of weapons were neatly arranged inside, their shining blades exuding a thirst for blood. The blacksmith grabbed an 8-inch dagger and threw it to Hansen. "This is the one. Take it and leave." Hansen's eyes were attracted to the knife on the north wall of the room. The style of the knife was ordinary, but it was the only weapon on the north wall, while the other 3 walls were fully covered with different weapons. "How much is that knife?" asked Hansen curiously. 100 million, the blacksmith said coldly, pushing Hansen out. 100 million. What material did you use to make that? Hansen could not help but ask. 75% Z-steel, the blacksmith said. "Next time you need to buy something, come here directly." 75% Z-steel. He must be exaggerating. With the current technology, we can't even produce alloy with more than 5% Z-steel. Hansen whispered to himself. He didn't say anything though since he wouldn't buy it anyway. Back home, he heard the ringtone from his comlink and saw Zhang Denfeng's number on the screen. He answered the call. "Sen, come to Twilight. I have a gift for you," said Zhang Denfeng excitedly. "What gift?" asked Hansen. "You'll know when you get here." "See ya," replied Zhang Denfeng, keeping Hansen in suspense. Hansen changed his outfit and went to Twilight Tavern, which was a restaurant Zhang Denfeng often took him to. The dishes served here were delicious and the decoration was outstanding. When he arrived at the reserved private room, Hansen was surprised to see Han Hao there as well. Han Hao saw him and looked very uncomfortable. Han Hao forced a smile and said hello. Hansen smiled back at him, and was then pulled aside by Zhang Denfeng. Being a private person, Hansen thought it was quite alright if Han Hao didn't want to have any contact with him, and he had no hard feeling about it. Zhang Denfeng did not pay attention to any of these and asked Hansen to sit on the sofa. Zhang summoned a white saber-toothed tiger beast soul, which turned into a sharp knife in his hands. Showing a few tricks with the knife, he asked proudly, "Sen, what do you think of my newly gained mutant beast soul?" One word, awesome. Hansen gave him a thumbs up. Hansen had wanted a mutant beast soul weapon for a while, but he had no luck with beast souls recently. "Old friend, now I have a new knife, so I want to give my old weapon to you, if you don't mind." Zhang Denfeng slipped Hansen an alpha alloy broadsword. Hansen was a bit surprised to see the broadsword, which was of the same style as the one he just cut off. This broadsword, Hansen was touched. Zhang Denfeng was such a dear friend that he would just give away a weapon worth $1 million to him. Before Hansen had time to say something, the door of the private room was pushed open and a fat woman draped in jewels squeezed herself in. "Son, I saw you when you came up here. You said you had important things to do when I asked you to go Mr. Hu's banquet. So, this is what you call important. What do you expect to gain from hanging out with these lads? Mr. Hu has invited his son's friends, who are all young leaders on planet Roka. You should make friends with them to succeed in the future." Han Yume threw a rampage at Han Hao, taking him out. "Mom, By the time Han Hao wanted to explain, he had been pulled out the room. "Stop it. The young master of Sunwood Mining, Lin B Fang, is also here at the banquet. I heard that he is also in steel armor shelter now. If you two can bond, you would do so great in the shelter," said Han Yume. Han Hao was a little depressed. He had come here to make things right with Hansen and use his connections to enter Qin Xuan's steel armor gang. Han Yume's words had rendered that impossible. Han Hao thought that Hansen was definitely sleeping with Qin Xuan to get where he was. Or else how could he confront Luo Tanyang and be recruited into Bullseye? Although Han Hao was disgusted by a gigolo like his cousin, he wanted to use Hansen's connections to enter steel armor gang himself. That was why he didn't show up at the banquet and came to Zhang Denfeng's gathering instead. Surprisingly, Mr. Hu's banquet was also held in this building, and Han Yume happened to see him. Hence he had no time to mend his relationship with Hansen. Never mind. The young master of Sunwood Mining, Lin B Fang, happens to be in my shelter, and now he has come to planet Roka for the banquet. This is indeed a great opportunity. I heard he is an upstart and spends money like water. It would be great if I could cozy up to him, thought Han Hao, as he straightened his clothing and followed Han Yume to the banquet hall. "Your aunt is outrageous." Zhang Denfeng was upset. "It does not matter. They are strangers to me," said Hansen casually. He then asked curiously, who is this Lin B Fang she was talking about? Hansen also knew a guy named Lin B Fang who had traveled through the mountains and ended up in steel armor shelter. Hansen had even saved his life. Just one lucky dude. Jiang Denfeng started to tell Hansen about Sunwood Mining. Sunwood Mining used to be a small company with several mines, and later they bought a garbage planet to deposit their waste, where they ended up finding a lot of precious minerals. Within 20 years, by selling the rare minerals they discovered on that planet, Sunwood Mining had become a prominent interplanetary mining group, the boss of which was Lin B Fang's father. Lin B Fang had just entered God's sanctuary and was already known for his generosity. Many were trying to make friends with him for that. Such good luck, Hansen sighed. Such is life. He must have outperformed billions of other sperms to be who he is. Jiang Denfeng smiled and said, but Sunwood Mining has no facility here on planet Roka. What is he doing here? In the banquet hall of the same building, the social elite were chatting and drinking, many of whom had already entered Second God's sanctuary in their 30 seconds. However, the focus of the banquet was a 16-year-old teenager. If Hansen were here, he would recognize the teenager was Lin B Fang who he had saved. Lin B Fang was entertaining all guests gracefully. From his good manners, no one would think he was nouveau rich, and several socialites were attracted by him. Han Yumei and Han Hao had wanted to speak with Lin B Fang, but they found no chance as there were too many people who were more powerful than them at the banquet, and everyone wanted to talk to Lin B Fang. Naturally, they didn't dare to offend these people by cutting in. The banquet was over. When Lin B Fang was stepping outside the building, they finally found an opportunity and wanted to approach him. At the time, Hansen and Jiang Denfeng also happened to come over. When they saw Han Hao, Jiang Denfeng wanted to greet him, so Hansen had to follow. Before Jiang Denfeng could finish his sentence, Han Yumei pushed him and Hansen aside and said harshly, "You two stay away from my son. Especially you, Hansen. You are already notorious in steel armor shelter, so do not implicate your cousin. Don't even say you know him, or I will come after your family." Han Yumei then walked toward Lin B Fang with Han Hao. Jiang Denfeng was stunned and asked Hansen, "What? You and Han Hao are in the same shelter?" Hansen nodded. "Let's go to a quiet place and I'll explain to you." Having heard Han Yumei's words, Hansen knew that Han Hao had told her about what had happened in steel armor shelter. Han Yumei and Han Hao finally managed to approach Lin B Fang. As Lin B Fang happened to be looking in their direction, Han Yumei said hurriedly, "Mr. Lin, this is my son Han Hao. He's in the same shelter as you." Lin B Fang acted as if he hadn't heard her and directly went past her and her son. Han Yumei was dumbfounded and watched Lin B Fang leaving. Lin B Fang walked faster and faster toward Hansen and Jiang Denfeng, who were just leaving. He grabbed Hansen's arm and cried, "Sen, I have finally found you. Brother, I've missed you." Lin B Fang then gave Hansen a big hug. Both Han Yumei and Han Hao were shocked. They had no idea how Lin B Fang would know Hansen and call him brother. Hansen pushed Lin B Fang away and frowned. "Why are you here?" Lin B Fang wasn't offended at all and quickly offered cigarettes to Hansen and Jiang Denfeng. He said excitedly, "I came to look for you. I heard you live on planet Roka, so I came here. But I don't have your address and it took me days to ask about it. Now I've met you, you must look out for me in the future." Hansen saw everyone was looking this way and said to Lin B Fang, "Let's not talk here. We can catch up later." Hansen and Jiang Denfeng went out, and Lin B Fang quickly followed them. "Sen, my aircraft was parked outside. Let me give you a ride." Han Yumei and Han Hao watched Lin B Fang cheerfully following Hansen around and couldn't believe him to be the elegant young master they saw at the banquet. Han Hao, it was indeed Hansen who was talking to Mr. Lin. Han Yumei still couldn't believe her eyes and asked Han Hao after they were out of the building. Han Hao clenched his teeth and said, "Yes, it's him." "Why on earth did Mr. Lin know him and respect him like that?" asked Han Yumei. "Well, there is nothing remarkable about him. He's just a gigolo, using a woman's connections, putting his cousin down." Han Hao was green with envy. "What? Didn't you say that he offended a powerful lady in steel armor shelter and was having a hard time?" asked Han Yumei. "If you weren't King Xuan's boy toy, how would Mr. Lin know someone like him?" Han Hao then bitterly recounted Hansen's experience, adding his imagination here and there. No wonder he could come up with $2 million. A gigolo. I've always known he was a scourge, a disgrace to our name. Our ancestors would be so mad had they known, said Han Yumei viciously. Filled with jealousy and hatred, the mother and son left the building. Seeing Lin B Fang opening the door of the aircraft for Hansen and Jiang Denfeng, their faces darkened further. That will be all for now. I hope you find this story interesting. Leave a like, subscribe, and enable notifications so you won't miss the next part of this story. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.